Welcome to the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Joining me as always in Brighton, Joe.
Nice to be here, guys.
Scotland, Finno.
Always a pleasure.
Snowy Salzburg, Kev.
It's freaking freezing here, isn't it?
I wouldn't say that now. Bursting right into it, Saturday, 1:30 Central European time. Burnley against Arsenal at Turf Moor. Burnley on a bit of form, actually. They drew at Leicester on Wednesday. Arsenal have had a break, though. They haven't played since they beat Leicester last Saturday, so bit of a break for Arsenal. Of course, Burnley beat Arsenal earlier on in the season at the Emirates, Joe. Which way is this one going to go?
I think it depends which Burnley turns up. If it's the Burnley that played against Tottenham and got done 4-0, then you'd have to say Arsenal will be heavy favourites. But, you know, Burnley, they're safe now. So how much have they got to play for? Whereas Arsenal will still be hoping to try and finish as high up the league as possible. I saw with Arsenal, you know, Nicolas Pepe, 72 million quid, has scored a couple of goals in the last few games. They seem to be finding a little bit of form. So you would have to say that Arsenal should win, but it's never a home banker with Arsenal.
I mean, we've derided Arsenal a fair bit this season, but they are still, you know, a solid mid-table team going up against a team that I think is still... I mean, they're getting there to being safe, but they're still at the risk of being relegation. And, you know, if it wasn't Arsenal and that kind of very, you know, Jekyll and Hyde-esque performances that they can give, I think we would be saying that the mid-table team are always going to win this game. It's a bit of a weird weekend, this one, because the way the fixtures have panned out, the majority of Saturday's fixtures are just simply the appetizer for what is, you know, a great Sunday and Monday. But yeah, I don't expect Burnley to get much here.
Tell you what, Finno, that must have hurt the Arsenal fans, mustn't it? That a solid mid-table side. Are you taking the piss? I mean, all I'll come back to again is I haven't watched all that much of Arsenal this season, but if you look at the table, honestly, there's still 11 games, or for them, way more, right? At least 12 games to go. They win. Anyone puts together 4 or 5 in a row, and they're right back in it for Europe, and maybe even the Champions League, because everyone else is really dodgy. So solid big. That did make me laugh, mate.
Reality bites for Arsenal fans, though, Kev. Arsenal, of course, will have that, like I said, a few days extra rest, having not played midweek, and I think that will help Arsenal. I think they'll get the win here at Burnley. At Bramall Lane, 4:00, Joe, Sheffield United against Southampton. Sheffield United, 10-man Sheffield United beat Aston Villa midweek. Of course, Joe, like Arsenal, would have had that extra rest. Which way is this one going to go, Joe?
Well, when you're on a run like Southampton are on, I don't think you're favourites to win any game, whoever it is, Sheffield United, West Brom. Sheffield United had a brilliant result against Villa. They're now statistically not going to be the worst team in Premier League history because they've got 14 points, not 11. Over the last 10 games, this was a crazy stat. Since Southampton last won a game in the Premier League, Sheffield United have won 4 times. That just shows you like the turnaround. So I actually think Sheffield United are probably favourites. Looking for the positives, we have a couple of players back. I think Kyle Walker-Peters is going to be back. I've heard some rumours that there's been at Staplewood this week, Saints have had a real kind of break the air, like a real kind of crisis meeting to try and figure out what the hell is going on and get the season back on track. Hasenhüttl this week has kind of given a bit of an ultimatum to the board saying, either you back me in the summer or I'm going to leave. We need more players. Southampton were woeful against Everton. There was no fight, they just didn't seem to really be trying, which is really horrible to see as a fan. And you just hope that they're going to go to Sheffield United and try and be positive. I think if we can just get one win, I think we'll go on a little bit of a run and get a few wins. We just need that one win from somewhere. We need, I don't know, the ball to come off Danny Ings' arse and into the goal. We just need some little bit of luck, some spark. So I'm a little bit nervous about this one. You don't want to lose to Sheffield United at all, but I don't think we're favourites.
I think I saw something that Southampton are either the worst or the second worst team of 2021 in the Premier League. And Liverpool and Newcastle aren't that much further up the table. And I can say that as West Ham sitting there proudly in second. Surely Southampton win here. if I look at the table and the way that the relegation battle seems to be panning out, I think probably a win here puts Southampton about 3 points away from safety, I would say. I don't think it's going to be that full 40 points to safety sort of thing.
Yeah, you'd hope not. And obviously, I think Fulham, they've played Tottenham, they've got Liverpool, and then they've got Man City. So you can't see Fulham really winning any of their next 2 games. So if Saints can just get 3 points, we'll have quite a nice kind of buffer again. It's just when you haven't won a game for so long, it's really hard to know where that next win is actually coming from. I've been thinking, are we in the relegation battle? And I've been kind of in denial for the last few weeks, thinking surely we're going to have enough. But you can't keep losing games. But I think you're right. If we can beat Sheffield United, you would think we should be just about safe.
I don't agree with you, Finno. I don't think it's a formality for Southampton. I think Sheffield United are a very tough team to play, especially on their own patch. I mean, they went to Old Trafford and won in the last few weeks. Of course, Villa, are no mugs. A lot of the games they've lost, they haven't been hammered. So I wouldn't be surprised, Joe. Now, saying this, I think Southampton will be safe, not because they're going to go on a run, but I just think the teams below them won't get enough points to probably catch you the way things are. So, but I do fancy Sheffield United to possibly get something from this game. Of course, there is that extra element of rest, having not played midweek, plus Sheffield United played the last 35 minutes with 10 men.
No, I'm with you, JP. I think if it is, as Joe said, if it is a question that there's an attitude problem, then Sheffield United are well prepared to take care of that. Because from what I've seen them recently, that's not a problem with them. They still believe that there's something in this season for them, even though none of us do. I think they still believe there might just be something. And if Southampton, if it really is a case of them not trying, they're going to get beat.
I think in this one, it's first goal wins personally. Southampton, as we saw against Chelsea, when we scored the first goal and we've got something there to hang on to, the confidence is there. It's when we go a goal behind like we did against Leeds and against Everton, we just never ever look like getting back into it. I think if we score first against Sheffield United, I wouldn't put it past us to get the 3 points.
Aston Villa against Wolves at Villa Park at 6:30. Villa, of course, who lost to the 10-man Sheffield United. Wolves were hammered by Man City. And having watched their last 2 games, Wolves, like I said, there is a threat from Pedro Neto and Traore on the wings, but nothing really down the middle. And I fancy Villa, even though there will be no Grealish. He won't be back in time, according to the manager. I fancy Villa to do this. Well, Villa are unpredictable, a little bit like Leeds. But for me, this Wolves team are a shadow of the team that was playing last season. Finno?
Yeah, and I don't want to disrespect the rivalry between Aston Villa and Wolves, but this is a derby of sorts between 9th and 12th in the Premier League. And I just think that there's some far more exciting games this weekend. It's going to be an interesting one for Villa. I think they need to win to keep any hopes of European football alive. But then, yeah, as Kev said, if they're able to, pull a string of 3 or 4 wins together, maybe then everything looks totally different. But yeah, I don't really know which way to call this. I think I wouldn't be surprised if it was 4-0 either way or a bore 0-0 draw.
I'd go as far as saying the defeat to Sheffield United has probably done Villa's hopes for European football. When you look at the teams in front of them, you've got Everton, West Ham, Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal, all competing for that kind of 4th place and the Europa League places. So it wouldn't surprise me if Villa drop off a little bit now and lose a few games and kind of finish between, somewhere between 10 and 12. They've had an amazing season. I think some people forget where they were before lockdown 1. They were dead and buried. They were relegated. So to stay up and then to be competing for Europe and in the top 10 all of this season, you'd have to say Dean Smith is in the category of, manager of the season.
Yeah, and they've been really good to watch as well. But don't forget, they did spend £200 million, Joe, which compared to the likes of Newcastle and Southampton is worlds away. The evening game, Brighton against Leicester City at 9:00. Brighton lost to West Brom the weekend. Of course, they had that extra rest, didn't play midweek. Leicester did play, drew at Burnley. Leicester are missing 7 players, Joe. This is a really good time for Brighton to play Leicester, and I think this could be the game where they jump away from that relegation zone.
I mean, potentially. I mean, if they create 25 chances in this game, you'd hope they might put one of them away. Whereas in the last 2 games, they've had all the chances and haven't been able to win. you're right though. It is a good time to be playing Leicester. I think I mentioned this on the pod last week. It was going to be interesting with Leicester if they do draw and lose a couple of games. All the talk is going to be about top four, and we know what happened last season. They were in the top four for the whole way and then dropped out on the last game of the season. Is it in the players' minds? Are they a little bit nervy? But Brighton, they just can't score goals, as we've talked about all season on the podcast. They can't score goals. I wouldn't surprise me if this one is a draw, actually.
JP, you talked about this in the last podcast, the idea of losing to Slavia Prague could be a blessing in disguise because, if they win here, they go above United, they go into second place, and it really starts to feel as if top four is going to be solidified. There's already rumours about the players they're looking to bring in with Odsonne Edouard and a cut price deal if they're able to make the Champions League. Brighton, I was looking at their form, and they're just drawing way too many games. And if you compare them to somebody like Newcastle, they've drawn significantly more games than Newcastle have. But there is that spark with a team like Newcastle where they can turn it on. They can pull out a performance like they did against Everton, for example. And I just don't see that spark coming out of the Amex. And so it's going to be difficult. I think Brighton, they're going to come up against Kasper Schmeichel, who has been one of the kind of perennially good goalkeepers of the last five seasons. So it's going to be tough for Brighton. But with 7 injuries, you would hope that they're able to mount some sort of challenge.
Yeah, I still can't see it, honestly. I think, Brighton on a bad run. Leicester, all right, it was a nervy win, but that's not a gimme. The game, a nervy result, but that's not a gimme. That game, I think they still have plenty. I think you're looking at a side Leicester who are classy. They don't lose very often, and Brighton do. And I think Leicester are well capable of winning this.
I might go for the draw in this one because, Leicester are missing 7 players. Brighton would have had that rest. They're like Fulham. They're really good to watch and look. But like you said, Finno, I do agree with you there that they lack that kind of killer instinct. Don't get the goal. But, I see them maybe getting a point against Leicester. Moving on to Sunday, massive game at the Hawthorns, 1 o'clock Central European time, West Brom against Newcastle. Now, before I go into the game, I just want to talk about a few things off the field at Newcastle. There's big problems at Newcastle, huge problems. Steve Bruce, as we know, had a row with Matt Ritchie, which went public. He came out today and said he will do his utmost to find the source of the leak. Of course, Matt Ritchie wanted to leave in January, but Bruce didn't let him go. There was supposed to be a deal on with Bournemouth for Josh King. It didn't work out. Ritchie stayed. Ritchie's been on the bench the whole time. He hasn't picked him once. Now, there's been a journalist banned from St. James's Park as well, which is it's nothing new. Mike Ashley is used to banning journalists all the time. I can tell you through my sources at Newcastle that the journalist is Craig Hope, who's from the Daily Mail. And he's been banned. And then there seems to be toxic going on in the dressing room. And you have to question Steve Bruce. And if there is a mole in the dressing room, somebody that's leaking things to the press, has he lost the dressing room? That's a question I would ask. Now, in the actual squad, Newcastle are going through a really crucial period, a massive period, where Fulham, who are right behind them, have a tough run of fixtures. But just as this happened for Newcastle, and the next 3 games are massive. It's West Brom, it's Villa, and it's Brighton. I think Newcastle really need 5 to 6 points here. But there's 7 players out. And can you imagine Liverpool without Salah, Firmino, and Mane? Newcastle are without Saint-Maxime, Almiron, and Callum Wilson for the whole month, and they won't come back until maybe start of April, maybe mid-April. But listen to these stats. Those 3 guys who are out, who I just named, are responsible for 16 of Newcastle's 27 Premier League goals this season, which is absolutely massive. So, I mean, you're going to the Hawthorns. Okay, West Brom lost to Everton. Newcastle would have had a rest. But really, your main, your spark of life, you're looking for somebody to hold the ball upfield like Callum Wilson or Almiron or St. Maxime. You got Ryan Fraser, Joe Linton, and Jacob Murphy. I really don't see where the goals are going to come from in the next few games. And where I said we really need 5 to 6 points, it looks pretty bleak. And we might only get 1 or 2 if we're lucky. Like I said, West Brom did lose to Everton. Big Sam will be out. He'll have a big point to prove here. He really will. And, of course, they've been quite good in the last few games at home, West Brom. They beat Brighton. They drew at Man United. They were decent enough against Everton. So this will be a really tough game for Newcastle. And I'd love to say we'll go and get 3 points, but judging what's going on in the dressing room, which seems to be toxic. I mean, Steve Bruce came out today and basically did his best to try and cover things up and say, look, this happens in grounds up and down the country, which it probably does. But I can tell you one thing, it doesn't get leaked.
It's a sign of a very unhappy dressing room. You've seen it up and down the country, as Steve Bruce says. I don't think the training ground bust-up is an issue, but I do think the kind of the leaking to the press ultimately shows, somebody isn't happy in that dressing room. I think this probably could end up being a draw, but a draw really isn't good enough for West Brom, and I don't even know if a win is good enough for them because of the goal difference. I think the goal difference is going to be West Brom's undoing. They need to claw back 9 points on Newcastle to stand a chance of being safe, but they also need a 19-goal swing. And, in the 12 games, 11 games that they've got left, I just don't see it.
I wasn't surprised to hear that it was Matt Ritchie involved. He is the angriest man in the whole of football. I know I said a few weeks ago that I thought that Newcastle had enough goals to stay up, but like you say, JP, they're just all injured. I actually think that West Brom will win this game. They're not in that bad form. They drew a couple. They beat Brighton. They actually only narrowly lost to Everton. They had that, very dodgy offside call in the last few minutes, didn't they, for the equaliser? So I actually fancy West Brom in this one.
Finno, everything you said was true. I think it is going to be really hard for West Brom, but that's not going to help Newcastle in this game. West Brom might not ultimately stay up, but I really do think Newcastle is looking really precarious now, isn't it? We said a few weeks ago it could get sticky for Newcastle, and it really is right now. And like you say, better than anyone here, JP, about how hurt they are going to be with the forward line missing. But yeah, it sounds awful.
Yeah, I would be honest, Kev, I am really worried, and it would have been tough enough going to those 3 fixtures, the pressure they're under, knowing that they have to win, but doing it without your only real 3 sources of creativity and goals in the team is going to be almost impossible. And also, I think if it's 0-0 with half an hour to go or 20 minutes to go, it'll be West Brom who are going for the win. They'll bomb forward. I'm not confident about this game at all. You never know. It's a strange game, strange season. If they can somehow get the few points, I've been a Newcastle fan my whole life, and it's always been drama. It's always been box office. So it wouldn't be one thing; it's something else. The next game, of course, at 3:00 Central European time, Liverpool against Fulham at Anfield. Liverpool have lost the last 5 in a row at home. Fulham, I watched against Tottenham, played really well. Could have got something from the game. I looked, Kev, at Salah was hauled off for Jota with about half an hour to go, I think, or whatever it was to go. He looked very, very unhappy. And this might be some kind of a record, is it? Like it's the worst home record Liverpool have had in their history in the top flight. What's gone wrong?
What's gone wrong? I think if I had to sum it up really quickly, I'd say I do think, it sounds like it's pleasing, but I do think Liverpool had some pretty bad luck earlier in the season, but they were still playing pretty well. And I think they had some injuries. For whatever reason, they were creating lots of chances. The goals just weren't going in. But we highlighted about 4 weeks ago the problem that I mentioned, that Liverpool's strikers over the last 2 or 3 years, they've been out of form. All of them have been out of form for quite long stretches. But what had happened now is that all 3 were out of form at the same time. And I think this is what we're seeing now. We're seeing that it's not working in terms of that forward line. Someone like Klopp, it's hard, isn't it? When things start going wrong, you don't know what to do. You don't know whether to absolutely stick to your guns, which I think is what he's trying to do, and he's just trying to double down, or do you try a plan B? But Liverpool, what plan B do Liverpool have? Origi has not looked like a Premier League footballer for a year. Minamino's gone. Other teams have young players coming through who you sort of think can make an impact. We've got Harvey Elliott at Blackburn, I think. And we've got other players out on loan who look like they might have been able to maybe come in and do something. We don't seem like we've got an electric player to come off the bench. There's no 17, 18-year-old. There's no production line like we've seen from, a Manchester United or even a Chelsea. I think we're in this situation now where, like I say, up until about 4 weeks ago, I was confident that at least we were playing some football. Now, I don't know what we're doing, because that game against Chelsea, that was dire. You can't, there's no way around it. There's no sort of saying, oh, we were unlucky or anything like that. Liverpool were just shite. I'm really sorry. And I'm not saying Fulham are favourites or anything like that, but like I said last time, I don't see any reason for hope that we're going to beat them.
It's the most passive I've seen a Liverpool team in a long time. And it's just something that you don't associate with Liverpool of the last 3-4 seasons, but a Klopp team in general. Again, like I mentioned earlier on about Southampton, I looked at what had been happening in 2021. So Liverpool are 17th in the league if you only take 2021. They average a point a game. And when you're coming up against Fulham, who are playing for their Premier League survival, feeling probably I would say clearly wronged by the handball rule yet again. They played well against Spurs, a team that is being tipped to win the Europa League. There's clearly a very capable side there that can cause problems. You look at like an Ademola Lookman, they've got Areola in goals, Ruben Loftus-Cheek. There's enough there in that Fulham team to cause a Liverpool team that is low on confidence problems.
Yeah, more than that, mate. Yeah, they really can. They can look at this game and think, why not? You know, Liverpool always lose at Anfield these days. There's no fans there. Clearly, you can't lose 5 games in a row at home and then go in all full of confidence. But this is it. What's he going to do? You know, the substitutions looked insane. We don't know what's going on. You know, I read somewhere, I didn't see it myself, but the coaching staff, a couple of minutes before Salah got taken off, they were, you know, throwing their hands up because they thought he hadn't been tracking or whatever it was they wanted him to do. So I'm sure it made sense, and I'm sure the analysts all looked it over. But the thing is, you know, if you're 1-0 down and you need a goal, and you've got, you know, the last 5 minutes plus 5 minutes of injury time, you need Mo Salah in the box to give yourself a chance. You don't take him off. And then, I don't know, the players, even the players who came on, you know, Jota coming back for the first time since God knows when, and then a bunch of like crap midfielders coming on in the end. Well, not crap. I don't want to be like that, but do you know what I mean? Oxlade-Chamberlain. I mean, I'm sorry. Who's going to, you know, he hasn't looked like a Liverpool player in a long time either. You know, if Naby Keita comes on and Salah's still on the pitch, and you sort of think, well, he just might be able to create something in the last few minutes or whatever. But I thought the substitutions were dodgy. The performance looked lame. And honestly, for the first time, I thought, well, you know, sod this season for a game of soldiers. I just wish it was over, because honestly, we're on course to finish 10th.
If you don't finish in the top 4, Kev, and if Salah is unhappy, would he go?
Yeah, of course he would. And not just him. And we're at a stage where we need to start thinking about rebuilding, you know, long term, because we're not creating those chances. So, you know, I'm not writing off any of the top 3, right? The front 3. I'm not writing them off at all. But they need to be thinking about, what is the squad going to look like in 2 to 3 years' time, right? Absolutely. I've been critical of the people running the club because they've been rebuilding with bargain basement signings. And I don't think that's what you do when you're first the Champions League winners and then you win your first Premier League title. That's when you invest, right? And I know they signed Jota and a bunch of other players, but we've said this before, they only signed Jota because they got £14 million for Hoover. You know, they wouldn't have signed him for the 45 million, so they signed him for almost nothing as well. But anyway, you know, they need to think about that plan. And if you're outside the Champions League, it's really hard to do that. And, you know, all my jokes about Mbappe 2021, well, that's not happening, is it?
I think it's really interesting you talk about rebuilding, Kev, because I was listening to Gary Neville, I think it was last night, talk about Man City and how Pep is succession planning. And actually, he's built Man City 2.0 in his tenure. And I think that's probably where we're at in Klopp's tenure now. But it's the difference in the fact that Man City have perennially, you know, challenged at a high level. And actually what you're seeing is quite a distinct drop-off from Liverpool this season in this rebuilding process. And they're not even there yet. It's almost as if they've gone for the mountaintop in the Premier League. They've got there and everyone's kind of taken a deep breath out and they kind of don't know where to go next. And it's not as if they're bringing in the new players to really push them going forward. I'm
just going to say one thing really quickly. Think about it in another way. They massively overachieved last year as well. And that's the only thing I'd say. Think about it in those terms. Let's move on.
So next up, 5:30 on Sunday, we have the game of the weekend at the Etihad. It's the Manchester derby, Manchester City against Manchester United. Manchester City can't do any wrong. They're on fire. They're everyone's tip for the Champions League, possibly, and they probably have won the Premier League already. Let's be honest. Man United can't score a goal. Will they even finish in the top 4 now? We also have the question about Sergio Aguero. Will he be going at the end of the season? But, you know, back to this game, lads, you know, that this could be spanking really for Man United.
To start with, we should just go through Man U's record against the top 6 this season.
Is it 0-0, like I said last week?
Played 7, 1-0. They've only scored 1 goal in those games, and 5 of them have been 0-0. So odds are that they're not going to win this one as well. I think Man U have drawn 0-0 3 games in a row now, if you include the Europa League. You have to say that it looks like they're missing Paul Pogba, doesn't it? Fernandes seems a bit lethargic. He just seems a bit tired, which is completely understandable. He's played so many games, and he seems to have carried the whole team on his back at times. Rashford's not in form. Martial's not in form. Cavani's not in form. Everything points to a Man City victory, but in these big derby games, you can never fully predict what's going to happen. And it's happened a few times in the past where I thought Man City were going to dominate United, and it just hasn't happened. So obviously you'd expect City to make it to 22 in a row. All I would say is just be a little bit careful, because Man U can pull a result out of nowhere sometimes.
I'm going to go one step further and say that this game has a huge impact on the long-term future of Solskjaer's tenure at the club. And also this group of players, because they didn't deal with the pressure of being title contenders. In fact, I think quite the opposite. They had a bit of a purple patch and then did nothing. If they can't then deal with the pressure of them being chased by a Leicester, West Ham, Chelsea, etc. in the top 4, then I think United's leadership team have a decision to make. And if you look at the top of the table, Leicester are right there on their heels. It's going to be a very interesting game. As you say, they don't seem to be able to score a goal. City look amazing at the moment. I think everyone in the league can at least admit that. But in amongst all the plaudits that City have rightly been given, it's amazing how when the team's playing well, players just miss criticism altogether. So, we talk about Liverpool's front 3 all misfiring. Aguero hasn't scored a league goal in a year. You would expect him to come back and and a lot of the times Man City looked to Aguero as their kind of talismanic, predatory instinct in the box. And he's just not been that. And, as I mentioned earlier on about Pep kind of planning for City 2.0, I don't think that necessarily, things seem to have gone very quiet on the contract front for Aguero. He does love this game. I think he's scored 8 in his first 8 Manchester derbies, which is, ridiculous. But you just wonder whether or not we've seen the last of that really kind of world-class fox in the box that City fans adored.
I wouldn't be too hard on Solskjaer or Manchester United, just yet. There is 11 games to go this season. Man City, basically, they're on another planet, how they're playing. Nobody, I think, in Europe would touch them in this league at the minute. So in Man United's defence, they're the best of the rest. The table doesn't lie. Okay, they're just a point ahead of Leicester. But, of course, Leicester, slipped up, lost against Arsenal, drew against Burnley. Like I said, missing 7 players earlier on. So, I think Man City will win this game convincingly. But if Man United can finish second, qualify for next season's Champions League, maybe win the Europa League, it won't have been all so bad for Solskjaer, because this happens nearly every other season where Man City are just out of this world,
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think it's a bit of a get out of jail card for Man United, actually, because I think you're right. What Finno said earlier on, they didn't cope with the pressure of being, in front or being genuine title contenders very well. City ran away from it. Right, there's nothing you can do about that. No one can match that. You can't be expected to play like that. Man United were not, as part of like the grand design of the grand plan, that would have, United were never expected to do that this season. What they were expected to do was, if it had been like it looked like it was going to be that no one was going to run away with it, then they should have challenged. So this relieves the pressure on Solskjaer enormously. All he has to do now, there's no difference between second, third, and fourth, right? All he has to do is nail fourth. If he doesn't, of course, then honestly, I never call for managers to be fired ever, but I would think that has to be it, because with Liverpool being so, having all their troubles, fourth is a meager target for a Manchester United. And so, like I say, pressure off because of Man United. This is the best thing that could have happened to Man United. Sorry, I do think it is, or for Solskjaer, let's say, obviously not for Man United, not for their fans, but for Solskjaer, this is it. He just has a clear run at fourth. All he has to do, keep it together, get fourth. The season's been a success. He keeps his job. He gets the build.
And he has to win the Europa League, I think. I can't see United fans just being happy with fourth, especially given the position they were in, But also, the Europa League's not a walkover either. I know that the press down south are basically handing it to either Tottenham or Man United on a plate, but there are some phenomenal teams still in there. And it's not going to be, a cakewalk for either of those teams. Going back to this game, though, I don't want to be bold in my prediction, but I do think that it's a question of how many and not if Man City win.
You be bold, Finno. Do it.
I agree, Finno. I think it's going to be a bit of a spanking, but I don't think that it will mean too much to Manchester United at all. I think they'll bounce back again and they'll finish second or third, and they probably will win the Europa League. So all is not too bad for Mr. Solskjaer. The final game on Sunday night at Tottenham. There's no more White Hart Lane against Crystal Palace at 8:15. All seems to be well at Tottenham again. Dele Alli's back. He scored the winner against Fulham. I watched it, and there's a bit of fluidity between Dele Alli, Son, Kane, and Gareth Bale. And they do look very solid at the back. I mean, Fulham troubled Tottenham at times because they kept the ball so much. But Fulham, against most teams, will keep the ball. And, it's how they play. But Tottenham, slowly building, sneaking up the table. They're only 5 points off Chelsea, who are in fourth place, with a game in hand. If they could leapfrog Liverpool here as well, possibly. So, Crystal Palace, they're safe. Really, they are. And they haven't got a whole lot to play for. I think a lot of the players, I would say that their minds would be on the beach somewhere in Barbados, but the way with COVID, there'll be a beach in Brighton, Joe. Tottenham to win this one, surely.
I don't have too much to say about Tottenham. Obviously, they were a little bit lucky, weren't they, in midweek? But I wonder if what Mourinho did with Dele Alli was spot on. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that's what he needed. We don't know what was going on behind the club. He took a lot of stick, for not playing him. But maybe that's exactly what it is, because he has come back and he looks really good.
I'm not one for massive claims, but I think Crystal Palace's last two games are probably up there in the worst two games in Premier League history. The 0-0 against Fulham was dire, and the 0-0 against Manchester United was just awful, wasn't it? Oh, horrific. All I'd say about Tottenham is after they beat Burnley 4-0 and then they got that early goal against Fulham, I was expecting them to go on and score 2, 3 or 4, but it seemed they kind of slipped back into their old way a little bit, where they just tried to win the game 1-0. And I think it always seems to happen in the Mourinho team. As soon as they score a goal, they just kind of instantly try and, compact, tight, don't let the other team have many chances. So I wasn't overly impressed with them against Fulham. But having said that, they should have enough to beat Palace. But Palace don't concede many goals. This game could be a 1-0 either way.
I hope we see the Spurs of the Burnley game where they came out 3 goals in the first 30 minutes or whatever it was. Because otherwise, I think that this will be, the perfect send people to sleep on a Sunday night. Because Palace, as you say, are just so boring. I genuinely think that one of their tactics is to bore teams into submission, lull them into that strong false sense of security, which is a shame because they've got some amazing players going forward, but they just don't seem to rely on them, or it's as if Roy Hodgson doesn't believe that they've got the quality there to be able to, carve teams open. You look at Andros Townsend, Benteke, Zaha, Eze, those 4 can rival most teams in the league for guile, pace, and, decent striking ability. Yeah, look, Tottenham should have enough here to beat Palace, and as you say, JP, Palace are pretty much safe, I think. So yeah, I don't see them really causing Tottenham much problems.
Yeah, I think the Spurs Mobile marches on. 2 games left on Monday night. Cracker at 7:00 at Stamford Bridge. This could be the second biggest game of the weekend. It's 4th against 5th. Chelsea against Everton. Chelsea were very, very impressive against Liverpool at Anfield, I thought. Their unbeaten streak goes to 11 games under Thomas Tuchel, and very professional performance. Good goal from Mason Mount. And, I got to say, fair play to Tuchel. He's come in, done a professional job. 1 or 2 guys, I think Christensen at the back was ignored by Frank Lampard, brought back into the team. Werner doesn't score, but boy, is he a handful. Boy, does he work hard, and does he create space for other players. Timo Werner, and he's a huge part of this Chelsea revival. Everton are on form. They're up there as well. I don't know if Hammers will be back for this one. I just think that this is too much for Everton, and I fancy Chelsea to carry on.
I think you might be right. I think he's an outstanding coach, isn't he? is it harsh to say you have to compare him with what the coach that came before? It's the professionalism and, the fact that it's this, he's a real technocrat coach, part of the new breed of uber qualified, coaches out there. And I think they're going to finish the season really well, Chelsea. They were really impressive, like you said, against Liverpool. So they looked like a really almost impossible. We talked about Liverpool's forwards being out of form. Chelsea were really good in defence, weren't they? And it was a really nice goal from Mason Mount as well. I think they're going to have. I think this is the game of the weekend, actually, because whatever happens in the other one, it almost doesn't matter. And I think if Chelsea win this one, it underlines the fact that they are pretty much I'm not going to say nailed on for top four, but they're really strong, really solid bet for top four, and that means that someone really big is going to miss out.
I think you're spot on there to not, cement their place in the top four, because they're just looking at their last 6 games. They play West Ham, Arsenal, Man City, a whole host of teams. And okay, Man City will probably have the league tied up by then. But I think Mason Mount is probably one of the players of the season. He's come in under Lampard and played well, probably been the shining light under Lampard, and then was instantly cast aside by Tuchel and has fought his way back into the team. And again, I thought he was one of the best players on the pitch against Liverpool. I did think that Timo Werner was looking sharper against Liverpool, and if he does manage to kind of hit form at the right time, it will make it very difficult for teams like Everton and West Ham who are vying for that final top 4 spot. Yeah, I mean, I've got to hope that it's a draw, because that's what suits West Ham, which seems very odd when you're talking about the top four matches. But yeah,
I think Richarlison's banging form, isn't he? He scored 4 in his last 4 consecutive games, and if he has a good game, he's very, very difficult to handle. He's a brilliant player on his day. I think this is going to be a really interesting game tactically. Like Kev said, you've got Tuchel and then you've got Ancelotti, 2 brilliant football minds. It's going to be a really interesting watch.
Yeah, Everton are definitely going to have a go. They won't sit back, but I just think Chelsea have too much. And, I think they are nailed on for top 4, lads, to keep going the way they're going. Speaking of top 4, West Ham against Leeds, Finno, is the final game of the weekend, Monday night at 9 o'clock. I have to say, fair play to David Moyes, because he came out today, and a lot of managers, when they're asked about this, when teams are not supposed to be up that high in the table, top 4 Europa League, a lot of them say, oh no, we're just taking it game by game. David Moyes, to his credit, said yes, top 4 is possible, which I thought was really positive, really, really confident from him. And, it Leeds, who knows what's going to happen when Leeds show up, when the Leeds party comes to town. But you've got to be confident going into this one, Finno.
I don't know if confident is the right word, but I think it's definitely going to be the test of West Ham's mettle. If they do have any aspirations, I'll not use the word dreams because I think that's a bit unfair, but aspirations of making the top 4, this just has to be 3 points. There's no ifs or buts about it. It will put us level on points with Chelsea with a game in hand. The one issue that we've got at the moment is that both Randolph and Fabianski are supposedly struggling with injuries. So there's your first choice and your second choice goalkeeper struggling with injuries, which is never a good place to be in, even when you have such an iron curtain of a defence in front of them. Leeds are a decent side though, there's no doubt about it. And I was looking at Leeds earlier today, and Rafinha has been an absolute revelation for them. So I was looking into his stats, and so his first Leeds start was in November, and he scored 5 goals and had 5 assists since then, and only Maddison and Bruno Fernandes have managed that same tally. So on one hand, he's pivotal to their success, but on the other hand, if you're able to kind of pull him out of the game, then Leeds suddenly become a little bit, less potent up front. Yeah, I spoke about United's mindset kind of being tested. West Ham's is definitely being as well, and they're not exactly an easy team to beat, but for a Champions League hopeful team, they have to beat them.
How much work do you think West Ham would have to do on their squad if you did finish in the Europa League next season, and then you end up going to Baku on a Thursday night and then a game on a Sunday? Have you got the squad, do you think, to cope with the demands of European football?
Absolutely not at the moment. But I think there's potentially, and this is just me, there's no kind of concrete evidence behind any of this, but I do think that if West Ham get top 4, they suddenly become a very sellable asset to the owners, and I wouldn't be surprised to see West Ham being put on the market. And if that then happens, they're probably a relatively cheap investment in the Premier League. With Champions League football based in London, they suddenly become a very, they become prime estate, essentially. If we get into the Europa League, yeah, there probably needs to be an Aston Villa-esque kind of £200 million. We're going to lose Mark Noble in the middle of the field, who, I mean, at the moment is essentially a man down in our 25-man squad. We need strikers. We need probably a couple, if not three players in midfield. And we probably need backup. I don't think that Yarmolenko is a long-term solution in backup for somebody like Jared Bowen. So yeah, I think there's a lot of surgery needed on that squad if we do manage to get to the Europa League. But Champions League suddenly becomes a lot easier to attract a higher quality of player.
There's a flip side to that also, Finno. I mean, I know obviously Newcastle under Pardew did a similar thing where they qualified for the Europa League. But, you asked the question there, Joe, about who else do you need? But a big thing is, West Ham are not a big fish in the Premier League. So you have to look at then your own players. Who's coming after you? The likes of Declan Rice, Antonio. You got to try and keep these players, Antonio, and then try and build on that. So the hard thing also from West Ham's point of view will be keeping the guys who've done so well this season.
I don't think that any team is paying the £100 million that West Ham are asking for Declan Rice. Chelsea barely touched half of that. I can't see anybody, unless, a United get money back for Pogba and they decide that he's the perfect example. But, 100 million for Rice. Mikel Antonio wants to go to the World Cup with Jamaica. He's not got the hamstrings. I just don't think he's going to get the pay packet and the minutes at a top team that's going to allow them to move on. And, once fans are back, 60,000 people in the London Stadium on a Wednesday night, if it is the Champions League, will be one of the best atmospheres in world football. And I don't think you can put a price on that.
Right. That concludes our games for the weekend. Just before Kev hits us with his lyrical masterpiece, I just want to have a couple of little chat about Liverpool a couple of seasons ago. After they lost to Real Madrid in the Champions League final, Jurgen Klopp brought in a guy called Thomas Gronemark, who was a throw-in coach from Denmark. And it's an unbelievable story that he has to tell. And he told it to me and Kevin a couple of days ago. You'll be able to hear it on Sunday at 1:00 Central European time. So check it out on our YouTube channel. The man who made Liverpool throw-in kings, the Thomas Gronemark interview. I got to say, he's a top bloke, Kev.
Yeah, it was a really, really fun conversation, yeah.
Right, staying with Kev. What have you got for us this week, buddy?
I've got a slightly less positive view of Liverpool. Here we go. March is here, the weather's turned, and Pep is Mr. Unconcerned. I make that 12 wins in 12 matches, the purplest of purple patches. There's still 11 left to play, but yeah, I think they'll be okay. 4-1 v Wolves, football to savour. It's time to call up the engraver. But other teams as well have reason to celebrate the new spring season, because Liverpool, perhaps repenting of all those years of unrelenting pride in home field glory, splendour, have offered up a home surrender. Chelsea were the latest winners to make the Reds look rank beginners, groggy, gone, out for the count, but Messi-esque from Mason Mount. And finally, I think we see a fan base getting prickly. We're all behind Klopp's revolution, but what the fuck, that substitution? Otherwise, the midweek fare was as sad as lockdown solitaire. United goalless at the Palace. Fulham suffered luck so callous as Tottenham struck, then to enrage you. VAR denied Josh Major. And Everton edged past West Brom through the great Richarlison. Leicester once again looked nervy and settled for a draw v Burnley. The battle for the top four's tight. And if we weren't all kinds of shite, I'd make the point that there's still time to make up for our football crimes. I've said before, life equals hope, but we'd need a blessing from the Pope, as well as the good grace of Allah, in order to hold on to Salah. So honestly, I must conclude the Reds were basically screwed.
Good stuff, Kev. Very positive stuff from a Liverpool fan there. Thank you very much, Kev.
Cheers.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, Finno.
Cheers. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening, folks. This has been the Irishman, Englishman, and Scotsman Football Podcast. Don't forget, like I said, to tune in to our YouTube channel on Sunday for the Thomas Gronemark Liverpool throw-in coach interview. And we'll be back on next Tuesday evening. And also hit subscribe to that YouTube channel as well. Thanks a lot and enjoy the games. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more of our podcasts, please click on the red subscribe button on the bottom right-hand side. Thank you.